Before we can really understand streaming, we first need to understand the 5 steps involved in rendering a web page. Step 1 is to fetch data on the server. We just talked about that in the previous video. Once the server has that data, step 2 is to render the React component into HTML on the server. Once we have the HTML, the server then sends it along with any additional CSS and JavaScript down to the browser. In step 4, the browser will first render the HTML and CSS as a non-interactive page. And then finally, in step 5, JavaScript is executed when React hydrates the page to make it fully interactive. These steps are all sequential, and the problem is that a complex application might need to fetch a ton of data, which could result in a very slow page load, and that's not good for the end user. Streaming in Next.js works by breaking the application into smaller chunks to load things progressively. You can think of each component as its own chunk that will go through each of those 5 steps independently. The framework handles streaming automatically, but as a developer, you can leverage it to improve the user experience by adding additional components to a route, like a loading file. For example, you can add a loading component alongside a page, and Next.js will automatically render that loading component first, while data is being fetched in the page component. This can dramatically simplify your code, because otherwise you would need to build some kind of client component to detect when the site is loading, which would not only be more complicated, but it would also be much slower. Under the hood, React Suspense is the magic that makes this possible. Suspense is a special component in React that creates a suspense boundary, which works by wrapping a component that does something asynchronous like fetch data, then shows fallback UI until that async operation is done. In other words, it provides a very intuitive way to handle loading states. You can use Suspense directly in a Next.js application, which can give you more granular control over the UI. However, in most cases, creating a loading page is the ideal way to go. The bottom line is that streaming is awesome, and best of all, it just happens automatically without needing to think about it. It doesn't have any negative impact on SEO, and just kind of magically makes your app load faster.